Hi everyone, my name's Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and today I'm going to be bringing you my Trans Rights Readathon Backlist Book Picks. I recommend for you to add to your TBR for this week, but also in general. So I'm going to start off with ones I haven't read first. I was really tentative about putting books I haven't read yet, but I'm basically basing it off of what I've seen from a lot of people or from auto-buy authors. So what I will start with to make this make any sense is I have not read Stay Gold. I've heard about Stay Gold, but I haven't read it. It was on one of those things where it was on my TBR for, I don't know if it was last year or 2020, because the last couple of years have just felt like one big year in general. But Stay Gold is something that I saw on my TBR and my feed, and I was really intrigued in it, and I just never got to reading it. It was one of those books where I was putting together this backlist recommendation post, and I was like, oh, I really wish I had actually read this one so that I could, give a very heartfelt review as well, but I haven't. So Stay Gold is that recommendation or suggestion from me. The next one is Lark and Kasim Start a Revolution. I have not read this one, but it is by Kaysen Callender, and Kaysen Callender is an auto-buy author. This is Kaysen's most recent one, I feel like, at the time. When did this come out? I'm not exactly sure when this came out. This is an ARC, as you can tell. But I think I won it in a Goodreads giveaway, and I never got to reading it, even though Kaysen Callender is an auto-buy author. I really love Hurricane Child, and my rec that I wanted to pick for Kaysen's work is Felix Ever After. I loved Felix Ever After so much. I think this is such a gorgeous portrayal of the way that identity and feelings can change throughout our life. I think that is such an important conversation that needs to be had about these kind of ever moving, struggling kind of changes that we can have with our identity and also our feelings. So I thought that was incredibly important. The next one is Cemetery Boys. Aiden Thomas is a fave. If I had to pick, though, between Cemetery Boys and the Sunbearer Trials, I would definitely pick Cemetery Boys, mostly because it is just one book, whereas the Sunbearer Trials is the beginning of a series, and you will also feel so shocked at the end of the Sunbearer Trials. So less shock here. This is my gorgeous Barnes & Noble's edition, but this is just such a beautiful portrayal of friendship and family and acceptance all together, also with ghosts. So definitely a recommendation, especially if you love YA urban fantasy, so YA fantasy just set in our world. I really, really recommend this one. The next one is, I realize I'm going according to my list, but also the pile next to me. The next one is Pet. I really, really loved Pet. Pretty sure Pet is a middle grade, and Pet is just such a gorgeous book as well about... It has a fantastical element, which I really loved how that developed. I was not expecting it. And then it developed into something so gorgeous and heartrending, honestly. And so Pet is one of those things where I feel like you see that recommended a lot, and you should definitely believe the hype. The next one is Meet Cute Diary, which is just a cute romance, a contemporary romance as well about... Well, I mean, you have the word meet cute in it, but also about falling in love and about how messy it can be and complex it can be, and how I love it is embracing joy and embracing a romantic spin on it, because I feel like you can have a lot of books that feel very much like they're talking only about issues or struggles, which are very important and valid stories, but I think there's also a way to also have place for celebrations, romance, and to see these characters, these queer characters in other settings, other worlds, other scenarios where their story is not only based on their identity. I think there's just a place for both of them, and I think Meet Cute Diary is a fabulous example of that. The next one is The Brilliant Death, which is a YA fantasy. It, to me, is obviously it features in these trans book recs, but it's mafia politics meets shapeshifting. That is very much the magical kind of setting to The Brilliant Death. It is such a gorgeous book. I really loved it. I read it as an ARC, and I knew that I needed to buy the finished copy after I read it, just because I felt the main character is torn between not only identity but also family and power. All these like three different words I think are really well explored in this book. They've gotten cover changes. So this is the old cover, but the new covers feature the artwork of characters. I don't have the sequel with this new cover artwork, which you can see the people on it. I really love these new covers. This is on my TBR mostly because I read The Brilliant Death a while ago, but I haven't picked up the sequel yet, or I haven't read it yet. So definitely wanted to recommend The Brilliant Death, especially if you want to read YA fantasies. The next one is Man o' War. I'm just taking off my pile. Man o' War. This is such a gorgeous, heart-rending, emotional book. First of all, it features swimming like a swimmer. I could never do that. Water and I do not mix well. But anyway, aside from that, this is a story about friendship and identity and family and love, all wrapped into one. It was just one of those books where every gorgeous emotion in like the entire spectrum is in this book. It was an emotional roller coaster of kind of the best variety. I felt love and anger and heartbreak and just like everything in this book. I recommend it so highly. And it's a YA contemporary, by the way. It also has like a water park, or I can't remember exactly. I'm pretty sure it's a water park. Yeah, Sea Planet, a marine life theme park. So a lot of really gorgeous contemporary touches that make it feel very grounded and just really fun. I think that I have also an interview with the author of Man o' War on my blog, so I will find that for you all and link it below. The next one is Hell Followed With Us, which is a YA fantasy. It has like a post-apocalyptic vibe, but it also has a lot of horror elements to it as well. So definitely kind of a mishmash of all of these really elements that you have to kind of be in the mood for. You know, post-apocalyptic horror kind of YA fantasy is not everyone's cup of tea, but I loved Hell Followed With Us. It was interesting because I read Hell Followed With Us in a whole sort of stream of other kind of horror books, and I was kind of like, what is this? Am I a horror reader now? The answer is no, but I will always make an exception for Hell Followed With Us because I think the story about love and friendship, especially in this kind of post-apocalyptic world and setting, feels so tender in a way that, like, I don't want to say contemporary books don't, but I think that there's a way that this setting really sort of elevates and intensifies these relationships and these issues and all of those conversations around friendship and love. And so I think that Hell Followed With Us is one of my favorite books, definitely to recommend. It just has to be your cup of tea, basically. The next one is A Lady for a Duke, which is a historical fiction romance. But A Lady for a Duke is so good. I read it in like a few days because I was so in love with it. I have a copy of it somewhere. I love this book so much, but I like cannot find my copy of it anywhere, and I had to make this video, so here we go. But if you love historical fiction romance, you definitely need to read A Lady for a Duke. It is one of those books where it just feels so tender. It's like a second, is it like a second chance romance? No, it's a romance for sure, but it definitely has a lot to do with like our internal struggles and our internal dilemmas. And what I've really, really, really loved, I feel like, is that you can see this conversation where, you know, queer people have been erased from a lot of modern history that we know or that we are taught. And so we get this misconception that like queer people didn't exist before now. I feel like I hear that a lot on the internet, which is frankly just not the case. And so what I really love also about A Lady for a Duke is putting this queer identity, putting this trans main character within a historical fiction setting, because I think that this conversation and needing to see the diversity that was there in history is just such an important conversation to have. So definitely recommend Lady for a Duke. The next one is Not Your Villain, which I also thought I had a copy of, but I can't find it. It is a superhero series, so it's a YA urban fantasy in the sense that it's set in our world, but there are superheroes. So if you love superhero stories, you definitely should read it. It is the second book, I think, maybe the second or the third, basically, in the series of Not Your Sidekick. I'm pretty sure it's the first one. So Not Your Villain, I think, is, number 2 or number 3. But it is such a fabulous book series. I love this idea so much. If you love superheroes and you love group casts, then Not Your Villain, Not Your Sidekick, I think is in another one, Not Your Hero. I don't know. The titles are all like around that kind of vibe, but it is so good. They're also relatively on the shorter side. I think that I don't know how many pages they are, but I have a paperback version, I think, somewhere on my shelf of Not Your Sidekick. And I do remember thinking, like, oh, this isn't like super big. So it's definitely a recommendation if you're trying to also read as many books as possible in this week and want to try to read shorter books as well. And the last one that I have is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. I really have loved everything that I've read by Rivers Solomon, but I always go back to An Unkindness of Ghosts because it's the first ever Rivers Solomon book I read. I don't know if it's the debut from Rivers Solomon. I didn't look that up. I'm sorry. But it's definitely the first one I read from Rivers Solomon. And it is such a fantastic sci-fi book, which really delves into racism. It delves into like sexism. It delves into all of these issues on like this giant spaceship. Okay, it's been forever since I've read it. I'm so sorry. But I've loved it so much. The world building felt so rich and so immersive. It's one of the first things I was reading in my kind of renaissance or resurgence of sci-fi books that I have loved ever since, but also like reading sci-fi for fun again. So it was part of that wave, and I just remember being utterly swept away to this setting and loving these characters so much, even though it is a very emotionally intense book as well. So I got a little something for everybody, right? I got some romance, got some sci-fi, got some post-apocalyptic horror kind of thing going on. So I hope that you really think about adding any of these books to your TBR for the Trans Rights Readathon. But as I said, also in general, because we should be reading these books all year round. You know, it shouldn't only be something that we're reading this week. So definitely really happy to share this. This is just one of the earliest content for this week on my YouTube channel. So I will keep this brief and say I will see you in the next video. Bye.